Okay, so just a quick announcement, and then later we'll go with the seminar. So Maria is starting PhD with us, so she will be here for the next years, and just to announce it.
The other announcement is new people also. Megdad Sedian, welcome. He was here for a few months, and then now he's with a postdoc with the Complejos. So let's go with good afternoon, welcome everybody. Let's go with the seminar today. Our speaker today is Juan Fernandez Gracia. Most of you know him personally. He worked on his PhD here. It seems that he got his PhD more than 3 years ago now.
Yeah.
His supervisors were Victor and myself. And already during his PhD, he started to work on this subject in collaboration with Luca Pecaonella at the Harvard School of Public Health. Then he moved there as a postdoc, and he's back here as a postdoc. And I understand this was work that was started during his PhD, continued there, and now finally finished.
Yeah, finally published. I don't know if finished. Okay. Yeah, I'll be talking about the influence of patient transfer network of US inpatient facilities on the incidence of nosocomial infections. But quite a long title. But while I was, so first of all, maybe the physicians in the room, because I know there are some, maybe excuse me if for my ignorance. If at some point I say something wrong, please correct me at that point, and we'll learn all of us. So while I was doing a bit of research to prepare an introduction for this, I came to know the story of this man that I didn't know, but probably the physicians will know, but I didn't. I thought it was a good starting point for this. So when you look for you don't have to dig too much into the internet to see this man. So you look for nosocomial infections, you go to the last paragraph of the Wikipedia, and it says the history of nosocomial infections, and they talk about this man. So he was an obstetrician, Hungarian, working in Vienna, and he noticed that, he was called the savior of mothers, and he discovered that the incidence of puerperal fever, which is a kind of infection that women get when giving birth sometimes, and can cause death, could be drastically cut by the use of hand disinfection in the obstetrical clinics. So what he noticed in 1941, when he was working in Vienna at a maternity guard, is that there were two wards there in Vienna. And in the first clinic, there was a threefold or fourfold rate of deaths by this kind of fever in women. And he couldn't. So these were gratis clinics because they were trying to avoid infanticides of mostly prostitutes. Or raped women and so on. So they could have for free, were taking care for free, but the only thing is that they were students, the people that were doing the medical things. So he was puzzled by this, having a threefold, fourfold rate of deaths in one clinic and not in the other clinic. He couldn't understand because basically all environmental conditions were the same. The only different thing in the beginning, later I'll say another thing, was that one opened one day and the other the next day. So they were alternating. And the women knew about that, and they wanted to enter into the second clinic. They tried to, and even if they knew they had to go to the first clinic, then some women even gave birth in the street. And he was even more puzzled by that, because the rates of death of women giving birth in the streets was even lower than at his clinic, at the first clinic. So that kept him thinking for a number of years. Then at some point, I think in 1847, a friend of his, also a physician, had an accident while making a forensic examination, and a student poked him with a scalpel. So, and after some time, that friend of his died of an infection that he managed to characterize similarly to those infections of women there. So he came up with a theory that wasn't really accepted at that time, where, well, it's the 19th century, not even the almost the mid-19th century, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the four humors theory was widely used to explain illnesses. So if you were too hot, you will have to get rid of some blood and these kind of things. So he came up with a theory that he said that the problem was that the students were getting some substance from the cadavers and bringing it to the women that were giving birth. What he proposed was hand sanitation. And this is what happened. This is the rate of deaths. And at the red line, he imposed that they had to wash their hands with a chlorine solution. He noticed that the rates went down by a lot. He wrote a book on that in 1861. It wasn't accepted. In his book, he had this data where he showed two clinics, more or less similar clinics, one in Vienna, the other in Dublin. The one in Vienna, at some point in, what's that, 1820 something, I think it is, they started having a ward where well, they started doing forensic examinations, and that's when the rates went higher. And at this line, it's when he implemented the washing, hand washing. He published it, he got bad reviews, he started writing letters to all of obstetricians of Europe. They say something like extremely offensive letters. The people around him started thinking that he was getting crazy. Probably he had some kind of dementia or something like that. So at some point, it's a sad story. So they say that when at the end of his life, when he was talking, any conversation would get to puerperal fever, and that's the only thing he had in his mind. So at some point, a friend of his told him to go visit a clinic, a new clinic that he had, but that was only to lure him into an asylum. And they put him into an asylum, but he noticed it, tried to get away, got beaten by the guards in the asylum, and died 14 days later of blood poisoning because of a gangrenous wound he had in the abdomen, probably because of the beatings. And that was 1865, and at that same in that same year, so before that, so he died. He wasn't recognized. Another physician was put in the maternity guard. The rates of death went up sixfold, but nobody said anything, and no more hand sanitation. Yeah.
I can see two things in those graphs. You have to know those. One is the first drop, the big drop you see there, at the beginning of the curve, which has nothing to do with washing the hands.
No.
And so I know it's known why was a big drop there. And same as I can see correlations everywhere. When one curve increases or decreases, the other does the same thing. So there should be something else.
Yeah. Of course. Seasonal environmental factors. Of course. I'm only talking about his particular measure, and these two are the ones that were in Bean. These have correlation, but not so much. This probably much more because they were the two in Bean. This one is one in Bean, the other in Dublin. So it is to be expected that probably the seasonal forcing is the same, but more particular things of the place are different. And I don't know. There is nothing said about that drop where I found the graphs. So in the same year he died, Louis Pasteur proposed his germ theory. This kind of bags were this cadaver material that he hypothesized that the students were bringing from the corpses to the women. So it was really not lucky for him. Now I will do something that probably is a bit wrong because like everything in science, no? So I will go through a very brief and very biased history of us curing infections. So from what I found in the almost 1874, Sir William Roberts noted that this mold, Penicillium glaucum, had the power of not letting some bacteria grow. At the beginning of the 20th century, well, at the late in the 1880s, in Germany, also the chemotherapy, so chemicals to attack bacteria. This kind of research was started by Paul Ehrlich, who later in 1908 got the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine for his contribution to immunology. So although it was in 1874 that they noted this with Penicillium glaucum with the mold, it wasn't until 1928 that Fleming discovered the actual molecule that kills some kind of bacteria, and it wasn't until 1942 that Chain, Flory, and Abraham succeeded in purifying this compound. So we are done, no? You just keep doing keep having new antibiotics, and we kill the bacteria, and that's all. No, because these guys appear. Not this guy. These guys. I killed my own joke. So what's the problem? That after some time having antibiotics, the pressure on the bacteria, the evolutionary pressure affects them, so they get resistant to these medicines. At the same time, our ability to find new antibiotics is decreasing. This is the approved new antibiotics in the US since 1983. This is by 5-year chunks, and it's constantly decreasing. So that's a problem. I also did right now, 5 minutes before, I looked up also in the Wikipedia. There is a list on all antimicrobials there are. I think that's a superset of the antibiotics. No.
It's a
wider term, but even with that, so I looked it up, and so this is the number of new antibiotics when they appear, how many they appear each year. This should be a 0, but you see that there is a high rise in the 70s, 80s, very early 90s, and then we have a gap in the production of this kind of medicines, which is a gap pressing us, because that means that our ability to cure infections is reducing. 1, because we don't have new ones, and 2, because the old ones are getting less effective with the bacteria that are around. Also, the World Health, just wanted to point out the key facts that says the World Health Organization on antimicrobial resistance. threatens the prevention and treatment of a wide range of infections. Well, that it requires actions, okay. I think it's even more important. Without these effective antibiotics, the success of major surgery and cancer chemotherapy would be compromised, and the cost of healthcare for patients with resistant infections is much higher. So it's also an economic cost, and that globally almost 500,000 people develop multi-drug resistant TB, tuberculosis, which is complicating the fight against the HIV. So with that, now I want to turn to the nosocomial part. So it's of special interest in hospital settings, because in a hospital setting, so what have we more or less learned? That if you clean, then it's more or less okay, because you kill the bacteria. But if you clean too much, or if you have you put many drugs, they create resistance. So in a hospital, that's the case, the most case you can have. So you're cleaning everything a lot. So if there is something that stays, it must be something that is called superbug. So that calls to the use, not only, of course, we have to find new antibiotics, looking for new ways to attack this bacteria. But if we can have other ways of attacking these infections and the spreading of this bacteria, welcome to that. So we are trying on that way. We are not developing a medicine, as you could have imagined. So hospital transfers and nosocomial infections. Well, let's see. In principle, we don't know if there is a relation between hospital transfers and nosocomial infections. Just another some data: almost 100 deaths annual in the US, 25,000 are estimated in Europe due to hospital-acquired infections, and a lot of cost because of that. There's I like this thing where a superbug tells another one in a hospital, "Hey kid, wanna be a superbug? Stick some of this into your genome. Even penicillin won't be able to harm you." It was on a shortcut through the hospital kitchens that Albert was first approached by a member of the antibiotic-resistant. So what we will study now is the transfer of patients in the US hospital system and the potential of the network it forms as a substrate for the spreading of pathogens. So the outline of the talk: first I will present roughly the data we've been, yeah?
What does nosocomial mean?
Nosocomial means in a hospital.
Okay.
Is there more implications? No, it's just from a hospital. Yeah. Hospital acquired and nosocomial, same thing. But I seem smarter if I say nosocomial. So we'll see which kind of data we've been using for this end. Then I'll tell you about the patient transfer network, both how we construct it and some basic characteristics of it. Then we'll go directly to the real question: is that a plausible substrate for a spreading process? And we'll see the case of Clostridium difficile. Clostridium difficile. Okay, it seems Italian, so it's difficile. I don't know. So we'll see the case of Clostridium difficile, which is a bacterium. And then well, there is a spoiler here. If we're asking if it serves, more or less the answer is yes up to a certain point, because then we are applying some network measures to monitor the system. So, and then I'll draw some conclusions on that. So, something is missing there. So what we have is all the stays in hospitals of Medicare patients during the years 2006 and 2007. What is Medicare? Medicare is a kind of, if I don't want to explain too much, because I don't know exactly the details, but it's some kind of social security, if you can call that, in the US, where you pay all your life, and if you haven't paid, you don't have it, but if you pay all your life, then you have some health care when you retire. So there is something. The files that contain those that data, it's called the MedPAR files, and they contain a lot of variables, 144 variables for each stay. So it says demographic, diagnosis, procedure, and billing information. Well, billing information is maybe 130. Well, or 100. Maybe 100. It's just if you had, if someone had to bring you upstairs, things like that. It's a bit crazy when you come from Europe and you see that. Well, we used, actually in Medicare there is people under 65, but this is people that are very, very, very ill, chronic illnesses, liver failures and things like that. So we kept only 65 or older, and this 65 or older constitutes 15% of the whole US population, but 37% of all hospital admissions. The average age of our study population was 77 years, with almost same female male, a bit more female than male, and 85% white. In the US, you still have to say the race, probably in the medical, okay, nothing. With high rates of chronic illness, as it's expected for a population of old people. So we have 21 million records of single stays in almost 5,500 different hospitals for 10 million single patients. This is kind of a view of the whole system. This is just the number of patients staying overnight in the hospital system as a whole. You can see, these are 2 years, you can see there is, well, maybe this is a physicist thing, but you see the seasonal variation that Raul was pointing out before in other plots. You see some monthly, well, not a monthly, you see a weekly variation. Well, very interesting. Yeah, well, you see these are admissions in red and discharges in blue, and you see that in the weekend it goes to a lower level. Also, you wait during the weekend, and then Mondays are very, very variable, and then you go on Monday, and then if you have to go out, you prefer to be out on Friday because the weekend is coming. You know, you can always also see that people are less ill in Christmas, obviously. And in Thanksgiving, yeah, and in July the 4th, yeah, it's the power of fireworks. So transfer extraction, because I told you we have all the stays, but the stay is when you enter, when you are discharged, in which hospital, and then all of these variables about billing information and diagnosis also very important. But transfers, there were a couple of variables implying transfers, that the stay is coming from another hospital, or when it is discharged, it goes to another hospital, but it seems that those codes are not very reliable, as physicians there were telling. So what we did is just to assume that the transfer was occurring whenever a patient was discharged from a hospital and admitted at another one on the same day. Okay? With that we get 900,000 different transfers distributed among 76,000 different hospital connections. A connection means from I to J. So these are two different connections from I to J than from J to I. So it's directed. And so it's directed, it's temporal, because we know when that happened at that day. And it's spatial, because you know from which hospital to which other hospital. So this is a network with a lot of characteristics, and well, we reduced that by looking at an aggregate, at first at least, at an aggregate of it. So this is the whole network that appears from the two years of data. You can see here, for example, that in the major cities, you see that the connections are stronger, so that there is a spatial component on this. So let's give some numbers to this network. So if you look at the in-degree distribution or out-degree distribution, what's the in-degree? The in-degree is from how many hospitals do I get patients, did I get patients in these 2 years, and out-degree is to how many hospitals did I send. It has an average of 14, and it's a bit wide, but not so much. The in-degree distribution is wider than the out-degree, probably because you can control to how many you send, but you cannot control from how many they send to you. The weight distribution, what is the weight of the okay, it's weighted, the network also, because for each link you also know how many patients were transferred. So this distribution is much wider, with an average of 12, but a standard deviation that rises up. And if you look at the distance of the transfers, so how many kilometers are between the hospitals from which it was discharged to he was discharged to where he was admitted, it's also well, it's not so. It seems a bit wide, but the thing is that this is a big drop, and then this thing here I shouldn't have plotted because it's referring to transfers to Hawaii. So 90% of transfers are less than 200 kilometers, which makes it also, when you look at the transfers in a temporal way, all of the transfers, you also get, well, maybe here the seasonal trend is, the seasonal variation is not so easy to see, but there is, and there is this weekly variation also, which you can see here. So there are more transfers. The most variable is Monday, but the most transfers are on Friday. And this spatial aspect of the network can for example, have implications if you try to do some community analysis on this network, and then you'll see that this is a multi-level community analysis made with Oslo, and you can see that the clusters that appear are geographically compact. Okay, yeah, I put this one because I was expecting someone asking what if you relax the assumption of 1 day transfer. Well, if you relax it and you say it's either today or tomorrow that you get admitted at another hospital, I don't about that. I don't really. Well, we don't really care for this work. If this is really a transfer where a physician said you have to go to this other hospital, or if it just happened, we know it from the data. So we think epidemiologically, it doesn't make a difference. Then when you relax the assumption of 1 day, you put it on 2 days. If you look, for example, at the distribution of weights in the network, they're practically the same. If you look at new edges, the blue ones are the new edges that appear. Well, maybe just with a photo you have to put numbers, but if you look at the weights, it's the same. The distribution of the difference of weights for the links that are in both networks, the one for 2 days and for 1 day, and the distribution of weights of the links that appear in the 2 day rule, they drop very fast. So they are we assume we can go with the 1 day rule because there is no big difference, neither qualitative nor quantitative between the 1 day and the 2 day rule. Yeah.
This transfer network is very different to the network that we expect for people movements.
Yes.
In general.
yes and no.
How can you discriminate this? The transfer of patient or the transfer of people as source of movement?
Okay, but when you can move freely, you can. I think you have to take into account different modes. Well, here also different modes of transport. I think this is more spatial than what you would expect for normal human mobility. So, for example, for the let's look at this. Probably for the what is called commuting network, you go to work at one place but you live in another one. Probably they are quite they have similar characteristics. But in general for human mobility, I wouldn't think so, because you need to add also plane transportation and things like that make the. Yeah, but I think the contact, the weight of that mode of transportation is heavier for usual mobility than. Yeah.
So the red curve is the cumulative.
Is the cumulative, yeah.
Okay. So this looks like a double exponential. You see an exponential going down and then another. No? And in the mobility, we expect something more homogeneous. You will expect only one single curve going down. So probably you have a neglection of something that is a short medium distance.
There is this thing here, no, marking a separation. We were speculating, but we didn't get to something sure. That up to, I don't know which number of miles, that is near the 200 kilometers, you start using more the helicopter and things like that. But I don't know if that's the reason. So that you try, that this is less represented, because you try not to do that, and then if it exceeds by too much, then you are
to go from one city to another city. You cannot go from one city to the countryside. Like you have a lot of empty space.
Well, because there are no hospitals.
Yes, there are no hospitals. To be assigned to city.
Okay, so yeah, we want to know if there is some spreading on this network, no? So at least as a physicist, I try to imagine the most simple situation and see if we can see that. So the most simple situation is a deterministic SI model, where you just drop an infected agent at some node of the network and you let it grow. Well, it's even easier than when it's probabilistic, because here should be a beta, the probability with which a susceptible gets infected when they meet. But if you put it to 1, then you have a kind of the fastest spreading process that you could have. So, which is kind of like the most violent epidemic that could be, and sets the boundary for any spreading process, and gives you a clear spreading pattern. So that would be like like a, not a golden standard, the perfect situation where you see something that starts in one place and starts spreading, and then you see that there is a spreading dynamics. I have done it on that network. You can do it in different ways. So you can aggregate the network like the one I showed you, and keep the global rates of transfer for its connection, simulate say that one hospital is either infected or susceptible, put one infected hospital, and see, given the transfers that you create, how many hospitals get infected with that. You can compare what happens if you use the real temporal network or the aggregated network, and you see that the temporal network is always slower but comes with more uncertainty. Okay, perfect. That this is, you can tell, this is Juan, this is not a proof that there is any spreading process going on there. You take any network, you put a model, but of course it spreads. It's a model that you've put there.
I understood that. This is when you have a transfer,
Yeah?
but then you have more infected in the hospital. Do they
No. I'm doing this as hospitals. I should have explained this better. I'm using the hospital as the units. The hospital is infected or susceptible. Then, so like it has the bug or doesn't have the bug. The most simple situation that we could have. That would be similar to some kind of population dynamics over that kind of dynamic that I explained. So, okay, we can even see that. So this was a collaboration with people in Boston, and then I worked in Boston, so that's why I just put that Boston MGH infected.
There is no recovery time? When you are infected?
No, it's SI.
In a model?
In this model, yeah, in this model. I'm saying, I was dreaming of getting something like this and say, there is something spreading. So that's the easiest way. Of course, there are models that may be more difficult to see if there is some spreading or not. Well,
this fancy thing is just the SI model run
on the network. And it's a deterministic SI model on the network. Okay, but now you'll see why I wanted to show that. Because then, can we observe spreading? Maybe not such spreading, but this is, I wanted to put that to put the audience in the same state of mind that I had when I wanted to look at the data and see if there was something spreading. So I expected those kind of things that I had learned at the university and that I had programmed and so on. So we look for a nosocomial hospital-acquired infection with a reliable diagnostic code in the data. So Clostridium difficile was chosen, and the states in hospitals that had this diagnosis were extracted from the data. We have, these are two caveats, two problems. We have no genetic data, so there is no way we know that the one strain was in one hospital and the same strain was in another hospital. So from the beginning, it's impossible that we can know if there is some spreading. Exactly no, but maybe we can do something to see if there are some hints on that happening or not. And we have only information about the hospital system, which is far from being a closed system. So you have a lot of people coming in and out, and now I'm neglecting all the people that come in and go out and stay there with the other people and then maybe come in again. I only have the people that go from one hospital to another. Even so, can we identify some level of influence or spreading dynamics over the patient transfer network for this Clostridium difficile? What is,
Sorry, one question. You stated that of people that have diagnostic with this bacteria, but the people could have been diagnostic at the second or third hospital. So do you also recover the previous history of the patient?
No, most of the, no, we didn't do that. At some point I was looking at that, and the thing is, you have from these 10 million patients that have transfers, I think it was like 8 million, something like that, only had isolated, or more than 8 million, only isolated transfers. So it's not even, it's maybe you,
In the previous one that was, he could already got at that hospital and then.
But we don't know if, still. We decided to keep with the data just as is, because you still don't know if it's that or if it's because it got it in the second one.
Yes.
So maybe we could have done something in the middle, no? Like apply some probability of having it from the other one. We didn't do that. So what is Clostridium difficile? So it's a bacterium that causes antibiotic-associated diarrhea, and 14,000 people a year in America die as a result of this. So if you look at the people that are infected, the hospitals that have people infected with this that we have in the data set, you see this. Let's see. No, you don't see anything. It was supposed to be a movie. So, this I expected. I wanted something, you know. I don't know. Starting here and going, or so. What is this? This is. Okay, these are all hospitals. Yeah, this is real data. These are all the hospitals that we have in the data set, and they are in red if they have that day one person having a stay with that diagnostic of Clostridium difficile. So you see, you have a kind of blinking pattern in some of them. In some of them, it's endemic and it doesn't disappear. I don't see any clear spreading pattern. So forget about looking for a front or things like that. So what can we do now? I think now it makes sense what I was showing before. Okay.
But there are some interesting features here, because you see those clusters where you have more hospitals close to each other, then they are all red. So it means that it's more difficult. There must be some transfer among them that keeps the pattern of a very big red dot in there.
Yeah, but we'll go to this because we don't know, or you cannot know directly if this is because they are just giving the infection one to another and keeping that kind of cycle, or if this is something environmental. And so this is New York, I think. Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is New York. This is Boston. And maybe New York is so contaminated that it's so full of filth that it's just like that, not because there is any transfer.
The size of the hospital is doesn't consider.
The size is not considered for this plot. We considered it in some analysis. Then the type of hospital also makes a difference, because general hospitals get incoming patients from many other facilities, and facilities, long-term stay facilities, also have more endemicity of these kind of things, because usually they come from another place and they have chronic illnesses and so on.
The disease is common in the general population or not?
From what I know, it's around 3% of people that are admitted in hospitals that develop this infection inside the hospital. In the general population, I don't know.
There are these bacteria in the general population, but is discussing the relation with real disease.
Mm-hmm.
So there is colonization also.
Okay.
People can be colonized.
Mm-hmm.
I think we are making a big mistake this one.
Okay.
Too clear. I insist on my previous question. If you relax, if you include the infectable to susceptible rate, and this is large enough, why should it be a front? You have a critical point, and you cannot reach the critical point.
I don't need it. I don't need
the recovery, which I can see in the hospital. Why should it be a front?
I don't need a front, geographical front.
I said that your model might have a front, you put something which is natural, which I see in the hospital, which is a recovery. If the recovery rate is large enough, you are beyond below the critical point, and you can see.
Yeah.
Well, there's also the so you have something that is there already, but you are going to see something that shows up and down, depending on how many people are exposed with the disease, or does it develop the disease in the place. If you want to see a spreading, you probably need to find a stream that actually appears in one side and then goes spreading.
Yes, that's very important, no? Because we know that there is epidemic strains of Clostridium difficile.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And there are other strains that are not epidemic. So actually, the network is very complete, but the biological issue is very unknown.
Yeah, I see.
I would propose to let Juan his story, and then we may comment.
No, mira. Okay, yeah, you're right, all of you. But, but I think I have something also to say. So, this I agree with Raul. Maybe I should have elaborated more on that. But if seeing that pattern, I forget about the front. That's for sure. I wanted to make the story simple, but maybe it went the other way around. So, what I did what we did in the beginning was to see if there is some correlation between the incidence in one hospital and the incidence at the neighboring hospitals. And by neighboring hospitals, I mean the hospitals with which I have a hospital has a connection on the patient transfer network. So what we did is to plot the incidence in hospital I, and in the y-axis, the average incidence in the neighboring hospitals. There are kind of two regimes. Here is maximization of this part of the plot. And you have a kind of a low incidence regime where there is some correlation with an R-squared of 0.5 and correlation coefficient 0.53, and another part where basically there is no correlation. So with that, I maybe not be super happy, but I'd be happy to see that that there is a relation between a hospital and the neighboring hospitals. But we were trying also to get to some medical audience, and this is for sure not enough. So, yeah.
You said that it can be environmental, so you cannot assume that this is because of the transfer.
That's one of the reasons, yeah. So we tried another thing, for which also the environmental cause can be confounding. So what we did is to aggregate the network, but not for the whole year, but for different windows of time, like 28 days, 56 days, 112 days, 1 year, the 2 years, and extracted the incidence at each hospital for all these time windows, and looked at the correlation of a hospital with a hospital's incidence with the incidence at the hospitals that were at 1 step on the transfer network, with the ones that are at 2 steps, and with the ones that are at 3 and at 4. Following a little bit the ideas of Nicholas Christakis of the influence you have on your friends and friends of friends and friends of friends of friends. And actually, if you don't aggregate too much, if you aggregate only for 4 weeks, you see some weak correlation actually at 1 step. This is something I've been struggling at some point to understand why at 1 step it's less correlated than at 2 steps, and I still don't have a clear answer. But if you look, for example, when you aggregate for 2 years, you see that at distance 1, you have much more correlation than you have at distance 4, and it decays with distance over the network. So with what could we compare to see that this is not a spurious result? So we randomize the cases to say there is a case that appears in hospital I, now it appears in a random hospital, and we tried randomizing the network. And if you do either of those things, the correlation that appears on the transfer network is 0. So which is already giving I think a strong evidence of the correlation between the cases that appear, the incidence of that infection, and the structure of the transfer network. I think I did too much. I was hoping to do it in 35 minutes. But they were not happy with that, the physicians. So we did another thing. What they were saying was that we couldn't discriminate between hospital-acquired infections, nosocomial infections, and community-acquired infections, which is the ones that you get at home or in the bar or wherever, but not in the hospital. So we did this. We did, you take one hospital, you make a radius of distance d, You take all the hospitals there, and now you make 2 variables with that, with those there.
Distance D in hops or in kilometers?
In kilometers. In kilometers, because we wanted to know the community-acquired infection, so we wanted to know about the environment, the real environment there geographically, if it has something to say. Now we discriminate between 2 types of hospitals inside this radius. The ones that are connected through the transfer network to the central hospital, and the ones that are not. And we do a regression of the log of the odds of this incidence with the incidence in the hospitals that are connected through the network and just are in the community but not through the network. And the coefficients, beta is for the network and gamma for the community. And you see that, for example, up to 100 kilometers, you have, when you have, it is more important even more, but I was just choosing one distance. It is much more important what is going on in the hospitals that are connected to you through hospital transfers than with the ones that are not connected to you, which in principle share all of the environmental conditions. Okay. I think there I went too far away saying that this means that the transfer network is a proxy for a spreading substrate. At least you see that there is a correlation between the structure of the transfer network and the incidence of nosocomial infections. But as I said before, we have no genetic data, so we have no way of saying that there is really a spreading process going on. Even with that, we decided, okay, now we know that the network is important, so we'll monitor the network so what you can do is put some hospitals that will be network sensors, and now I say that it is a sensor because it is able to know when a patient with that infection enters the hospital. And it covers also this is maybe a theoretical thing only, it covers also the hospitals to which it is connected through the network. We invented an efficacy measure which tells you Dn is the number of infected patients that the set of n hospitals can detect. So D1 is the number of infected patients that the system can detect with only one sensor hospital. So we are comparing here how many do I get when I have n sensors compared to n times when I had one sensor, because the first one is always the best one. And then this is good if it's high. What is bad? M is all the number of infected patients that we have in the data set. So M minus Dn is the number of patients that I do not get with the sensor strategy, and divided by M is just the fraction. So this is bad. When it's big, it's because I didn't get a big fraction of the infected patients. Then we tried four strategies actually. The fourth one is put sensors at random and see what happens. It should be worse than any other strategy that we can imagine. It seems it's not that way. Then we used in degree from how many hospitals do I get patients, out degree, and eigenvector centrality, which is a measure of the centrality of a node in a network. These two are local measures. This other one is a global measure. You need to know the full topology of the network to do this eigenvector centrality measure. And so we looked at when this, for which value of n, how many sensors do I need to put. What do I mean by in degree, out degree eigenvector? That I rank the hospitals by in degree, by out degree, or by eigenvector centrality. And then when I want to put one sensor, what I do is proportionally to its position on the rank. So the first one gets proportional to that thing, to the in degree, to the out degree, I choose it. So if it has a big in degree, by the strategy of in degree, I'll choose it more times than other hospitals. And we see that where is the maximum efficacy, that should be the place, that should be the number of hospitals that you should use. So we see that You use 108 with in degree, 167 with out degree, 42 with eigenvector centrality. That seems very good. And 332 out of 5,500. So these are the percentages. But the thing is that when you look at the coverage, so the fraction of detected patients that are ill, you see that they are around 80% in degree out degree and the random one at maximum efficacy, but eigenvector centrality is only 37%, so it's not performing so well. So you, instead of that, compare at 80% detection of infected patients, you get that the in-degree strategy is the best one, with just 2% of hospitals targeted as sensors and getting 80% of the patients. And as I'm running late, this is how it looks. This makes an idea of why eigenvector centrality is not performing so well. There is a lot of traffic, so this is by in degree. You see it's more or less spread around the country. This is the one that works better. This is randomly, also spread around the country, works more or less. Out degree works in between, also spread around the country. But eigenvector centrality gets very clustered around the places where there are more connections, because there is much more movement in these or these areas. Or here also, it's the case of Florida is special because many retired people in the US go to Florida, so they are overrepresented in our data set there. I will skip this because there is no time, but you can make a temporal version of that. So we extracted the temporal network of transfers between US hospitals and showed the temporal and topological patterns, strong weekly oscillation, strong geographical component. We show that the incidence of a particular nosocomial infection, Clostridium difficile, is correlated with the network structure of the transfer network. Wait, I have until, of the transfer network, which motivates the idea of network-based interventions. We can have an efficient surveillance system of the hospital system by having sensor hospitals ranked by their in degree and using a small fraction of them, only 2% to detect 80% of the cases. And well, that's the thing I didn't have time to. So thank you, and questions.
Is it realistic or feasible to really do this monitoring? I mean, there is a way to now, if that patient comes with the thing and you can stop the infection immediately?
I didn't get into that. Really, I see two problems at least. Well, I'm being too transparent, as Raul says. But I see two problems with this. Well, first is there is a problem of we are not talking about the same. Because you are talking about stopping and spreading, I'm talking about surveillance. Where giving an alert, maybe it's too late. So it can detect a lot, but it's not thought as of like a fire. How is it called? A firewall. It's not thought like that. The second one is that maybe thinking that a sensor also is able to know about what's going on in the other hospitals that where he has connections, that's maybe not very feasible. What we did in the temporal case, which is better, is that when the sensor gets someone that is infected, it enters into an alert mode, so it kind of gives the alert to the others, and it can detect also the cases in the others, but only if it's in alert mode. And it stays in that alert mode for maybe 5 days and then goes back to rest if he doesn't have new. So I think it could be implemented, and it's a local measure what we have, so you don't need to have, yes.
So congratulations, and like,
thank you.
From the biological point of view, there are a lot of things that we would like to know, of course, but I know it is very, very complex. So you treat the hospital as a unit, and say there is one infection, one infection, or not. But does this system actually is able to monitor the movement of the infected patients? I mean, the real patient that is infected in the hospital is transferred to another. So, because this is a real measure of the problem. The actual transfer of patients that are infected or colonized by the bacteria.
Yeah.
So, because in a regular hospital we have 1,000 patients, you have one infected, the probability that this one is the one that is transferred is very low. But if you had the data, you could know if the actual infected patient is transferred or not.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that goes a bit that's good for me, no, I think. Because if doing that, where I didn't have take into account who is the one transferred or not, it's just the hospital that has someone with that, and then there is a transfer. If you add the information about who is the one who has that, then it's even better, no? You can. So from these results, you can only go to a better place.
Because the actual tendency now for the transfer of patients is to let know the hospital, receiving hospital, whether the patient is infected or colonized by a multi-drug-resistant bacteria or difficile. So, I mean, the tendency in the future will be like this, no? Try to, because it is very important. We know that what you have gone to the US is very important. We see that every day in Mallorca, the transfer of resistant bacteria from one hospital to another. It is something that is very important that we can solve in the future with models like this or with actual surveillance and patient surveillance. No? So
I think this tells you more. I think that's more. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's more like the microscopic way that you will have to handle that. And this is more like a systemic way. I mean, this tells you more where if you have some limited resources, where would you put them? This is what it tells you. And then these resources could be whatever. Do more proofs on maybe random patients or not, or target specific patients and have this. The thing is also that when we say that, they say no, but the thing is you do it in all the hospitals. Yeah, well, then if you don't have limitation of resources, then do it in all the hospitals. But if you have limitation of resources, I think this kind of approach can help to say where to put them.
we have to do something like this in
Perfect.
Not that many hospitals.
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
much easier, no?
I think that the best in degree, out degree, and eigenvector is all some spaces.
More questions, comments, suggestions?
Please. Yeah.
Okay. Then if not, we thank Juan again.
Thank you.